Hey there! In this video, we'll talk about MongoDB with the ABP Framework. This video is going to be divided into two sections, the DbContexts and the repositories. We're not going to have the migrations part since we're dealing with MongoDB. As for the DbContext section, almost all the definitions will be the same as Entity Framework Core definitions, but instead of DB sets, we're going to be using collections. So yes, for each module, we're going to be creating a DbContext class and an interface. And we're also going to be using the connection string attribute, and we're going to define a collection for each aggregate root rather than DB sets. We're going to be setting a prefix for each module, and of course, we're going to configure the entities inside of extension methods. The replace DbContext attribute is almost the same as well. We can query by combining tables in different DbContexts as long as they are in the same database. And calling the configure extension method will be enough since it does not need migration. Now we've created a very basic ABP application without a UI and with the database provider of MongoDB. I'm going to navigate to the MongoDB project. And I'm going to find the DbContext class. As you can see right here, we've implemented the interfaces of the identity module and the audit logging module DbContexts. And by implementing, we mean adding the Mongo collections. After that, we've used the replace DbContext attribute. And last but not least, we've used the extension configure methods for both the identity and the audit logging. And that should be enough. Let's take a look at the tests. As you can see right here, we've injected both the modules through the iRepository, and we've also injected the iData filter. On the first test, we're trying to join both the modules together, and we're using the getMongoQueryable async method for both of them. When we join them and then check whether the result is null or not, it should not be null. However, the multi-tenancy filter would throw an error if we don't disable it. So we had to disable it, and we also had to disable the filter of soft delete. On the other hand, we have the second test, which uses the getCollection async instead of the getMongoQueryable async. And the multi-tenancy filter does not apply on the getCollection async, so we do not have to disable it right here. And we're also using the asQueryable method to convert the collections into queryables. And it should pass without disabling the filters. As for our module template, we've navigated to the MongoDB project and to the DbContext interface. We've added our collections according to the best practices and the connection string as well, and same with the DbContext class. Here are our collections and the connection string attribute and the configure extension method. And we are in our static class right here. We've configured our entities right here. And we're getting the table prefixes from our domain. The exact same as Entity Framework Core. As for the repository section, it is the same as we've seen with Entity Framework Core. The DbContext interface resolves the repository interface. We're going to use the DbContext interface as a generic parameter. And we're going to use the cancellation token provided by the ABP framework. And we're going to ignore the include details parameter since we're dealing with MongoDB. That's going to get all the data anyway, whether you say yes or not. Now this is a custom repository, same thing that we did with Entity Framework Core. This is the class according to the best practices. We're using the interface of the DbContext as a generic type right here, and it is deriving the MongoDB repository and implementing the iCustomer repository that we've created in the previous video, the Entity Framework Core video. And we are implementing the same method that we've implemented in the previous video with Entity Framework Core, but this time with Mongo collections. Same thing with the Mongo Customer Group repository class. We're doing the exact same thing with the exact same method that's coming from the iCustomer Group repository interface, defined by code async method. And I might have forgotten to mention in the previous video that we need to add our custom repositories to the dependency injection system. We'll go to the MongoDB module class and add them right here. and we're going to use the add repository method to add each custom repository. We did the same thing in the Entity Framework core project in the last video, but I might have forgotten to mention it. And as for the test part, we've moved the previous tests to an abstract class right here in the test base project. So it is an abstract class right now with these two tests. And then in both the MongoDB tests and the EF core tests, they're both deriving the customer repository test class. So they are both deriving it. You can right here, however, add specific tests for each DB provider. This one for Entity Framework Core, and this one for MongoDB. If we switch back to our sample app, you can see that we can do the same thing. We've created two classes right here that represent our custom repository, and they are our own implementation, and we can use them for default repository implementation. One of them is of type tEntity, while the other is of type tEntity and tKey. The first one is for entities with composite keys, while the other one is for entities of primary keys, like GUID for example. So we did define both of them according to the documentation, and we've derived the MongoDB repository and then overridden its methods. We're using the same method in both cases, which are exactly the same in this case, and we can add our custom logic right here that we've created this custom repository for in the first place. Both the methods are exactly the same in this case, but the classes are different. This class uses a primary key, while the other uses a composite key. And let's not forget to add them to the dependency injection system. This one's for entities with the primary key, and you can see the comma right here for it, while the other one is for the entities with composite keys. Please refer to the MongoDB documentations for more information. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.